Rich lady splashes mud on cleaner girl, unaware who is watching. Have you ever thought about how quickly dignity can be stripped away? Not in a battlefield, not in a courtroom, but in the middle of an ordinary street, in the blink of an eye. That day, the sun was soft and golden, the air light, the city alive with its usual noise. Children hurried to school. Vendors shouted prices for bread and fruit. Rickshaws honked impatiently. Everything was ordinary until it wasn't. A black luxury car roared down the road, its engine growling with arrogance. Its wheels cut through a puddle of muddy water, and in one merciless second, it splashed. The filthy water rose into the air and came crashing down on her. She was just a teenage cleaner girl, wearing her neatly pressed blue uniform, the one she had ironed at dawn with pride, hoping it would carry her dignity through the day. But now her face, her clothes, her very being dripped with cold, dirty water. People stopped. Some gasped. Some laughed. Some pulled out their phones, hungry to capture her humiliation forever. And the woman behind the wheel? She didn't even look back. She only adjusted her sunglasses with the smallest smirk, then sped away as though nothing had happened. What would you do if that were you? If your dignity was destroyed in a second in front of everyone? Would you scream? Would you fight? Or would you stay silent the way she did? Her fists trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to cry out, but her voice never made it past her throat. And yet someone was watching. Someone whose eyes burned with anger, whose heart demanded justice. That moment, the splash of muddy water, the silence of the crowd, the smirk of the wealthy woman, would not be forgotten. Because sometimes it isn't revolutions that expose injustice. Sometimes it's something as small as a splash of mud. Dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. And if this moment unsettles you, then let it unsettle you. Because silence is the mud that never washes away. Her name was Aisha. She lived at the edge of the city, where the streets were narrower, where the paint peeled from walls, and where the scent of fried bread mixed with the dust of unpaved roads. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, she woke to the distant call of roosters and the muffled chatter of vendors preparing for the day. Her room was small, barely large enough for a wooden cot and a crooked table. The plaster on the ceiling cracked in thin lines, like veins of an old hand. But on the table sat her greatest treasures: a neatly folded school uniform she could no longer afford to wear, a family photo with corners frayed, and an iron she used to press her cleaner's uniform with meticulous care. Each day, Aisha lit a small kerosene lamp, poured water into a dented tin basin, and washed her face. She would smooth back her hair, tie it tightly, and slip into her blue uniform. The routine was her armor. It gave her a sense of control, a quiet dignity in a life where so much was out of her hands. Outside, the neighborhood stirred awake. Children in mismatched shoes hurried past her home, books under their arms. She would pause at the door, watching them with a wistful smile. Once, she had been one of them, bright-eyed, full of questions, her laughter echoing down these same streets. But her father's illness had stolen that path. His wages had stopped. The medical bills had grown, and suddenly Aisha's hands had been forced to trade pencils for mops. Her neighbors knew her as the girl who never complained, the girl who swept the steps of the bakery with shy nod, who carried buckets of water without asking for help, who always smiled when spoken to, even when her eyes revealed her exhaustion. The bakery owner often greeted her, "You work too hard, little one," and she would reply softly, "Work keeps me standing." Everywhere she went, she carried herself with quiet pride, not because the world respected her, but because she refused to let it break her spirit. But the world noticed her only in passing glances. Some pitied her, some ignored her completely, and some, with cruel smirks, made her feel small, reminding her that to them she was invisible, a shadow meant to serve and disappear. She scrubbed the marble floors of wealthy homes until her knuckles ached. She polished glass windows, so clear they reflected back a girl she barely recognized anymore. Yet in her heart, she still carried a flicker of hope, an image of herself standing tall in a school uniform again, books in her hands, her name written on the cover of an exam paper. It was this dream that made her press her blue uniform so carefully each morning. If she could not wear her school uniform, she would wear this one with equal dignity. But there were cracks in the routine, cracks she tried to ignore. The whispers of the rich ladies when she entered their homes, the impatient sighs when she was too slow to bring a bucket of water, the sharp, deliberate clang of coins dropped into her hand, never placed with kindness, as though her skin was too unworthy to be touched. Aisha endured it all, not because she did not feel the sting, but because she had no choice. And still, she dreamed. She dreamed of a day when her father could smile without coughing, when her mother's back would no longer ache from bending over endless laundry, when she herself could return to a classroom, sit at a wooden desk, and raise her hand with confidence. But dreams are fragile things, and in a world built on inequality, they are the first to be tested. One morning, as Aisha walked to her work in the city, carrying her cleaning supplies in a worn cloth bag, she felt the weight of eyes upon her. A group of wealthy women, stepping out of a boutique, glanced at her. Their clothes shimmered with sequins. Their perfumes trailed behind them like invisible banners of power. One woman whispered something to another, covering her lips with perfectly manicured fingers. They both laughed. Aisha lowered her gaze and walked faster. Her cheeks burned, though she did not hear the words. She didn't need to. She knew them by heart. At the mansion where she worked, the manager, a tall man with a stiff suit and sharper tongue, pointed at a spot on the floor she had just cleaned. "Do it again," he snapped. "Do you think these tiles shine themselves?" She bit her lip, dropped to her knees, and scrubbed until her wrists screamed. He stood over her like a guard, tapping his polished shoes against the marble as though her silence amused him. This was her life. Each day layered with small humiliations, each day testing the thin thread of her dignity. And yet, she clung to that thread with both hands. Because for Aisha, dignity was all she had left. And this is why the mud, when it came, was not just water and dirt. It was a weapon. It was the world saying, "You are nothing." But here's the question. If you saw her standing in her pressed uniform, clinging to her pride despite everything, would you turn away? Would you laugh? Or would you stand with he? If Aisha's story already touches you, don't let it end in silence. Share her story. Let others feel what you feel. Because silence is how injustice survives. The days that follow blur together. Yet each carried a sharper sting than the last. Aisha's work stretched across the city. She moved between homes of the wealthy, carrying buckets that left raw indentations on her palms, scrubbing steps that were never truly hers to walk upon. It began with small cruelties. A wealthy white woman dropping her handbag deliberately into a puddle and demanding, "Clean it. Don't touch the leather with those hands of yours." Aisha obeyed, kneeling in the street, mud clinging to her skin as passers-by glanced briefly before hurrying on. No one spoke. No one stopped. At another house, a white child no older than 7 tossed crumbs on a marble floor, watching with curious delight as Aisha swept them away. His mother, sipping from a porcelain cup, laughed softly. Children will be children. Her tone made clear. Aisha was less than even a child's play. The weight of these moments pressed heavily upon her. At night, she lay awake on her cot, staring at the cracked ceiling. The laughter echoed in her mind. Her chest tightened with the fear that maybe, just maybe, this was her worth in the world. Yet in the mornings, she still smoothed her uniform, still tied her hair neatly, still walked with straight back. Hope was not gone. It was fragile, flickering like a candle in the wind. But the wind was growing stronger. One afternoon, as she was sweeping the marble steps of the downtown hotel, 2 young white men in expensive suits passed by. One pretended to trip over her broom, clutching his chest with exaggerated theatrics. "Careful," he sneered. "These people are everywhere. One day they'll trip us into the gutter." The other laughed, snapping a photo on his phone. "Smile for the camera, a little cleaner," he said mockingly. Aisha turned her face away, but the damage was already done. That night, her photo appeared online, shared with cruel captions. "Street-made fashion show." Strangers laughed at her bent posture, her blue uniform, the way she clutched her broom like a lifeline. She didn't see the comments directly, but whispers in her neighborhood reached her ears. "Did you see? They put her picture up. Humiliation seeped into every corner of her world. When she carried buckets through the alleys, she felt eyes on her, as though her dignity had been stripped and paraded for sport. Her mother tried to console her. "Daughter, people's tongues are sharp, but they cannot cut your soul." But Aisha knew differently. Words did cut. They cut deep, leaving invisible scars. And still she endured. The point of no return came on a day heavy with clouds, the air damp with the scent of rain. Aisha was assigned to a grand street lined with luxury cars, boutiques glittering behind glass, and pedestrians wrapped in silks and perfumes. She walked carefully, her cleaning supplies heavy in her bag, when she heard the familiar roar of an engine. A sleek black car pulled into the street, its polished body shining even under the gray sky. Behind the tinted glass, she caught a glimpse of a wealthy white woman adjusting her sunglasses. Aisha stepped closer to the curb, tightening her grip on the bag, willing herself to be invisible. But invisibility is a cruel illusion. The car swerved slightly, too close, too sharp, and the wheels tore through a puddle. A sheet of muddy water erupted, drenching Aisha from head to toe. For a moment, the world went silent. She stood frozen, her body soaked, mud dripping from her hair, staining her pressed blue uniform. Her fists trembled, not with anger at first, but with shock, with disbelief that someone could look at her and still choose cruelty. The car slowed, just enough for her to see the white woman smirk through the window, a deliberate, careless curl of the lips, as though Aisha were nothing more than an insect crushed beneath expensive tires. Then the car sped away, leaving the street echoing with laughter from bystanders who had witnessed the scene. Their laughter stung more than the mud. Aisha wanted to scream, to demand, "Why?" But her voice caught in her throat. Her chest heaved. The humiliation was unbearable. Every drop of muddy water felt like a declaration that she was worthless. She clutched her bag tighter, her nails digging into her palm, her eyes burning with unshed tears. And yet, somewhere in the crowd, eyes were watching. Someone had seen more than mud. Someone had seen her pain, her humiliation, and the cruel smirk of the woman who caused it. This moment was no accident. It was a breaking point. Because humiliation, when public, becomes something else. It becomes a wound that the whole world either chooses to heal or chooses to deepen. If this scene unsettled you, if you felt her humiliation in your chest, don't just scroll past. Share her story. Speak about her dignity. Because silence does not protect the oppressed. It protects the oppressor. The mud clung to her skin like a second, unwanted layer. It seeped down her arms, dripped from her chin, and soaked through the fabric of her uniform. Aisha's heart pounded so hard it felt as if her ribs would shatter under pressure. Her ears rang, not with silence, not with noise, but with a deafening rush of blood. Around her, the street seemed to close in. People whispered, some chuckled, others pulled out their phones. Screens lit up like tiny spotlights, capturing her humiliation. Her fists clenched tighter, nails cut into her palms. She wanted to melt into the pavement, to vanish into a crack where no eyes could reach her. But she stood there, trembling, frozen, as if rooted to the ground by the weight of every cruel laugh. The car that had splashed her was already gone, its tires humming faintly in the distance. But the smirk, oh, that smirk, was burned into her memory. The way the white woman's lips curved, careless and deliberate, as though Aisha were not human but entertainment. And in that smirk, something inside her cracked. Her chest heaved, her vision blurred, not only with muddy water but with tears she tried so desperately to blink away. She heard one boy in the crowd laugh. "Look at her face. She's ruined." Another voice chimed in, "Clean it up, maid. Isn't that your job?" The laughter roared louder than the thunder in the sky. But then silence, not because the crowd had stopped, but because Aisha's mind had. The world muffled. The laughter became distant, as though underwater. She could hear only her breath, ragged and uneven, and the thunder of her own pulse. And in that silence, a question rose inside her. Am I truly nothing? Her body trembled violently. She dropped her bag to the ground with a heavy thud. The bottles inside clattered, echoing through the street. Heads turned. The laughter faltered for just a moment. Aisha raised her chin. her wide, tear-filled eyes locked on the faces around her. She did not speak, not yet, but her silence itself screamed. It screamed of years of invisible labor. It screamed of floors scrubbed until her bones ached. It screamed of every whisper, every smirk, every careless word that told her she was less. The silence became unbearable. The crowd shifted, unease creeping into their laughter. Then her voice broke the air. Shaking, cracked, but clear. Is this what you see me as? A joke? A stain you can wash away? The words were not loud, but they cut like glass. The crowd fell still. A woman lowered her phone, shame flickering across her face. Aisha's voice grew stronger, fueled by everything she had buried. I clean your homes. I sweep your streets. I make your world shine while you step on mine. And yet, when mud covers me, you laugh as though I deserve it. Her body trembled, but her eyes burned with defiance. You think mud makes me dirty? No, mud washes away. What makes someone dirty is the cruelty they carry in their hearts. The words pierced the silence like lightning. The boy who had mocked her earlier looked away, his smirk gone. Some in the crowd shuffled uncomfortably, and from the edge of the street, the sound of footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. Someone had been watching, not just a crowd, not just a laughter, but the injustice itself. A tall figure stepped forward, his face partially shadowed by the overcast sky. The murmurs spread. People recognized him. He was no ordinary passerby. He was a man of influence, someone whose voice commanded respect in the city. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, locked onto Aisha, then turned coldly toward the direction the car had gone. The crowd's mood shifted. Laughter faded into a heavy silence, thick with realization. The story was no longer just about a cleaner girl humiliated in the street. It was about what they had witnessed, and who else had witnessed it. Aisha stood there, chest heaving, her uniform soaked, her dignity raw but unbroken. The mud clung to her skin, but it could not cling to her spirit anymore. This was the moment the world wanted to shatter her, but instead it revealed her strength. The mud did not define her. The cruelty did not define her. Her voice, shaking, trembling, defiant, that was her truth. If you felt her voice echo inside you, don't let it fade. Share this story. Speak it aloud. Because every act of cruelty needs a witness, but every act of courage needs one too. Will you be that witness? The rain that had threatened all day finally began to fall. Droplets mingled with the mud on Aisha's skin, streaking down her cheeks like tears the sky itself could not hold back. The crowd began to scatter, some ashamed, some simply unwilling to be part of the discomfort any longer. But not everyone left. The tall figure who had stepped forward remained. His coat grew darker under the rain, but his stance was steady, eyes fixed on Aisha with a kind of quiet recognition. He had watched it all. The cruelty of the splash, the smirk behind tinted glass, the crowd's laughter, and Aisha's trembling but unbreakable defiance. He moved closer, his voice firm yet gentle. You don't deserve this. For a moment, Aisha's lips parted, but no words came. She was exhausted, shivering, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. She clutched her bag from the ground, its contents dripping water. She wanted to disappear, but the man didn't look away. His voice rose, not just for her, but for the others still lingering. What happened here is not just about mud. It's about how society decides who deserves dignity and who doesn't. The words landed heavily. People who had laughed minutes before now lowered their eyes. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing their silence had been complicity. Aisha turned, her gaze falling on the luxury car disappearing far down the avenue. That smirk still burned in her mind, but stronger now was a memory of her own voice, cracked, trembling, yet undeniable. She had spoken. She had refused to let herself be erased. The man placed a hand over his chest, a gesture of respect. You stood tall when they wanted you to fall. That strength, it is worth more than their wealth. Aisha nodded faintly, not out of agreement, but out of sheer will to hold herself together. She walked slowly away from the crowd, her muddy shoes leaving dark prints on the wet pavement. Every step felt heavy, yet each was a declaration. She would not be broken. At home, her mother gasped when she saw her daughter's soaked uniform. "Child, what happened?" Aisha did not answer immediately. She peeled the mud-stained fabric from her skin, her hands trembling. She sat on the edge of the bed, silent. For the first time in weeks, tears flowed freely. Her mother knelt beside her, cupping her face with callous hands. "You are not what they call you. You are not the mud they throw. You are my daughter. You are light." The words sank deep into Aisha's heart, like warmth after storm. But the scars of humiliation did not vanish. They lingered, heavy, reminding her that tomorrow would bring another day of work, another risk of cruelty, another test of dignity. Still, something inside her had shifted. She had spoken back. She had claimed her humanity in the open. That could never be erased. But here's the truth. Aisha's story is not hers alone. It is a story of countless unseen, unheard lives. Cleaners, laborers, migrants, people who hold up the world while the world pretends not to see them. And when society laughs at their humiliation, it does not just harm them, it harms us all. Because a world that denies dignity to some is a world that denies humanity to everyone. The wealthy woman drove away, her smirk hidden behind tinted glass. She may never think again of the mud she splashed, the girl she humiliated. But those who watched, those who recorded, those who laughed, those who stayed silent, they will carry that memory. The question is, what will they do with it? Aisha pressed her uniform the next morning, as she always did. She walked into the city, her bag heavy on her shoulder. The mud stains had faded, but the memory remained. She carried it not as shame, but as fuel, a reminder that her dignity could not be drowned. She moved forward, step by step, into a world still cruel, still unfair, but no longer able to silence her voice completely. And in the silence of her heart, she held on to one unshakable truth. I am not what they call me. I am more. So now the question turns to you. When you see injustice, will you be the one who smirks, the one who laughs, the one who stays silent? Or will you be the witness who stands with the Aishas of this world? Because this story isn't just hers. It's ours. And if it unsettled you, if it made your chest tighten or your eyes burn, then the conversation cannot end here. Share this story. Talk about it. Let it remind you to look closer at the people society tries to erase. Because awareness is a first step to change, and silence is a soil where injustice grows.